Okay, so we've gotten into the summary part of our discussion on guards. So we talked about the 4 different guards: Vom-Tag, Ox, Flug, and Ulver. And now the question is, here's a good question, which is worth asking. That is, how do the guards relate to the cuts? On a related note, are they static positions from which you start cuts and end cuts, or are they potentially dynamic positions that you pass through as you're doing cuts, or other actions? It doesn't have to be cuts specifically. So for instance, physically, let's look at an example of right. Okay, so let's say here, Vom-Tag. Am I doing this as a regular kind of thing where I start still, move through a cut, and then end still? Or is it possible that we're doing something like this? So here's the argument, which is actually not an argument. It's 2 sides of the coin, right? I mean, I don't think there's anything that says that these guards can't be static or dynamic. So I think, to me, the jury's still out. But it's important that we understand that there's these 2 possibilities. And I want to make sure that people understand that, just because we're starting here and we're cutting through down, so from Vom-Tag, long point, onto Ulver, and then Vom-Tag, long point, Ulver, and flowing like this, these are non-ending cuts. But they are passing through what you could classify as guards potentially. So I think they're both potentially valid. We just need to keep that in mind. Now, and similarly, you can do things like that for Ox. And so just doing those flow cuts right there are transitions from guard to guard to guard, but without ever stopping. So that's the first important consideration. Okay, so another related discussion now is if you have this idea of actually cutting through guards without ever stopping, then I think there's an important point here to be made, which is when you cut from here, Vom-Tag, long point, Ulver, this allows it to basically keep going, and you're cutting at fullest extension. Now, I know that some people like to do the following, which is to cut from Vom-Tag to long point and almost to Flug. Okay, and if you do this, one of the things you'll notice is that both this as well as this, when you kind of slice up into Ox, these will kind of tend to put the brakes on those particular cuts. And you'll find that if you're really trying to aim for Flug, this is going to kind of stop the cut. It's not going to allow you to cut through. And I think that's an important consideration. Then we have to start talking about style interpretations of the system. I personally think that we're talking about a system which tends not to stop unless there happens to be something in the way that makes me stop. So for instance, this is worth doing some test cutting on, or just having, say, a tree or something and just trying these motions. Okay, so if you try this and actually try and cut into Flug or Ox, one of the things you'll see is that either by doing it, it's going to kill your momentum, or if you try and continue the momentum, you're going to be ending up short all the time. So in particular, this one, if you really try and cut through from below, one of the things you'll see is you're up here. In terms of a guard position up here, you're not here. If you do this, this tends to kill that momentum, and it tends to kill the power, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Now we get into tactics. So for instance, if I really want to cut through something, then I really am going to go to this position. But if I want to, for instance, want to slice somebody under the arms, that's fine. That's fine. But again, recognize what that's going to do is probably kill the momentum, which is fine. Puts my point on line, and I can come forward after that and actually hit. So I can do things like this, slice, stab afterward, as opposed to cutting through, and then maybe here I slice and stab forward. So I don't think it is necessarily obvious that these cuts are, things that naturally transition to flute from above or naturally transition to aux from below, unless you're assuming a certain type of mechanic where you're going to kind of kill the momentum and get that point online, as opposed to cutting through and coming around on the other side all the time. So those are just some considerations in terms of relationships between the cuts.